Alright guys, in today's video, we're going to be going over my two-call close framework that I primarily use for e-commerce and info product businesses. Now, keep in mind that although I use it for these two niches, this process is pretty universal. And I'd say 70 to 80% of my students are in some sort of online niche, but I've also seen equal success from some of my students who are in offline niches like real estate, gyms, dentists, chiropractors, you name it. So any sort of like traditional local business type, this works just as well for your agency. Now keep in mind that this video is really just a high level overview of this framework. And although I'm giving you guys this document for free, which I usually only give to my coaching students, if you're in my coaching program, you actually get access to an entire in-depth breakdown as far as the exact wording of certain phrases that I say, as far as the timing, as far as objection handling, and we even do a little bit of role play, sales role play at the end to ensure that if you already have some pre-existing, very common objections that clients usually throw at you, or you start to see a couple of different archetypes, right? Main types of clients, main types of client objections. That's something we go over as well in our coaching program. Now, for this video, first thing I wanted to mention is that this process is primarily for agencies that are doing a lot of outreach. So if you guys are getting a bunch of meetings off of cold email, which if you've watched some of my previous videos, you should have a good sense of how to do. So if you're doing cold email, if you're doing Instagram DM, if you're doing Facebook messaging, if you're doing LinkedIn, any sort of outbound client acquisition process, this video is for you. Now, this might not be as relevant if you're getting a lot through referrals, if you're getting a lot through a client acquisition funnel, or anything inbound. So if you're meeting people at like a networking event and people are already familiar with you and your company, and then they come back and they decide to work with you further down the line, this video is a little different because those leads aren't completely cold. So in this process, it's considering someone who's never heard about your company before you actually reaching out. Now you've gotten them on a meeting and presumably also had them answer a couple of qualifying questions in their application or in the scheduler. So they're coming into this call somewhat expecting what's to come, right? So both of you guys are probably on the same playing field, same thought process, but you're still almost strangers, right? So this process is really to warm someone up, even in a niche that's more difficult, like any sort of online niche, warm someone up and then also gradually bring them over to the stage where you can actually close them. And typically that's going to take 2 calls. Now, for this process, again, it's a little different for offline businesses because one of the other reasons why we do the 2-call close is to audit their account and get a better understanding of their existing efforts so we can actually diagnose why these symptoms, why these problems are happening. And with local businesses, I find that's a little less frequent. So if you're speaking to like a real estate agent, for example, unless they've tried Facebook ads in the past, you probably can get away with closing over 1 call, right? Because you don't really need to hop into their ads manager. You don't really need to look at their pixel. You don't really need to look at any other data. It's more so, okay, here's this new opportunity. Here's the opportunity cost you face. And then you pitch them on, okay, this is this new system that we have to onboard you to make it work. Whereas with online businesses, I find that the most qualified ones, so for me, that's doing anywhere above 25K plus in sales, bare minimum, having above a certain AOV, having above a certain customer lifetime value, etc. Those types of businesses that are more qualified, they've probably run Facebook ads at some point, at some stage in their business, if not now. And for us, it's more so, okay, how can we take you from barely breaking even after a certain level of spend to, let's say, doubling or tripling or quadrupling that spend within a certain time frame, and then keeping ROAS much higher. So if they're doing like a 1.6 and that was break even for them, how do we get them to like a 2.8 or 3 or 3.2, right? While doubling their ad spend in the next few months or tripling their ad spend in the next few months, okay? So it's a little different of a frame that you come into the meeting with. And that's the other disclaimer for this video is that if you're dealing with an offline business, you can get away with a 1-call close a little bit easier, okay? So for the first part, I always inform the prospect that they're being recorded before we get started. And the 2 main reasons for this is that number 1, if anyone else needs to get looped in, so there's a long chain of command if you're speaking to like a CMO and then they have to forward it, they have to pass details along to like a founder and then you have to all get on a call. It kind of saves everyone time and effort if there's some sort of point of reference to go back to. Okay, so that's the first reason. Second reason is that you can always also reevaluate your own sales process after those sales calls occur. So if you find that the last sales call didn't go particularly well, you can always go back and kind of audit your own process and see what you could have said better, how you could have reacted, the timing of certain things, etc. Now, the goal here is to always close, as I said, within 3 stages. And if you don't close on call 1, you want to stay on the call until you've booked in a time for call 2. So this traditionally is the entire first call. Sorry, up to here. Okay, so this is all data collection and context. Then in between the first and second calls, you get access to their ads manager or any other platforms you need to audit to understand their business better and audit their existing efforts. And then down here, it's optional to have your contractor or a team member or employee on the second call if you wanted to. This is where the second call begins. Okay, and I have this little 2A here if you wanted to, which is just, if necessary, you can also show some live accounts, maybe past case studies, past screenshots, etc. And you can bolster your pitch with this, but it's definitely not a necessary step. And then this third step here is talking about the price, negotiation, objection handling, etc. So we'll kind of go over these things at a high level in this video. Now, the first part here, just the context collection, is to just find out what their advertising looks like currently. And this should be very natural, and this should happen after a little bit of small talk occurs, even though I hate small talk. It should be very natural for you. So you can just jump in and ask, like, okay, in general, for the past, say, 3-month time frame, what has your general Facebook ad strategy looked like currently? How much are you spending per month, and how is that budget allocated across your campaigns? Okay, and you don't have to follow this bullet point by bullet point, but I'm just giving you a framework that you can go off of so that you're not scrambling and thinking of questions to ask during the call. I always usually start off with like, okay, how does your general strategy work? Okay, and then I zoom in a little deeper and I ask, okay, how are you allocating this budget? And what seems to be the main bottleneck, if you have any sort of hint or inclination about that. Okay, and then lastly, I ask them, how's the rest of your marketing budget allocated? And this is not just like a primer or teaser question. This is me genuinely asking them this because I want to know how diversified is their traffic. Because at least for my agency, I primarily do Facebook, and I also offer Google AdWords, but that usually comes at a later stage for a business or for any sort of client that we bring on. Facebook is our main offering, and I want to make sure that they at least have a couple other traffic sources coming in. Because if they're just relying on social media or they're just relying on Facebook, let's say they don't have much PR, maybe their SEO isn't even that good. Maybe they don't really involve influencers. They don't really have a lot of user-generated content, and a lot of traffic isn't coming in organically, and they're just relying on Facebook. That might be a red flag for me. So this is just, again, data collection, further qualification, etc. And like I said, the goal in this phase is just data collection and just to genuinely get to know the client better. And to do that, you kind of have to take what they're giving you and then almost think of it as like pulling a little bit more out by every single question you're asking. So first question, you always ask like, okay, in general, how does the Facebook advertising strategy look? What are some of the results? So they'll tell you like, okay, we're spending routinely like $8,000 a month and we're only seeing like a 1.6 ROAS. That's a symptom. That's not the root cause of the issue, right? So you want to pull out a little bit by bit, as I said. So you want to ask them, okay, how are you allocating this budget, right? In your experience, have you seen that you guys have been the most successful with your middle of funnel and bottom of funnel? Are you guys getting top of funnel to convert at a high enough rate? Which if they're getting a 1.6 ROAS, it's probably not the case. But you just want to get a more well-rounded understanding so you can actually really determine what their 2 to 3 main root causes or root issues are, right? Once you found out, let's say that their top of funnel is giving them the most trouble, and this is just purely hypothetical, then you can start not necessarily mapping back a full solution, but then you can start suggesting different things that you've done in the past or that your team's done in the past to remedy that issue. And again, you want to avoid making assumptions. So you don't just want to say, oh, we know for sure this is going to work. We know for sure that if you come on with us, we can definitely help you. We can get to X result. That's not the case here because if you do that, you're diagnosing too early. because you're still making assumptions. You still don't have access to the back end of their account. So if they're saying, oh, we're struggling at top of funnel, then you can say, and this is again purely hypothetical, you can say, okay, in the past, what we've seen is that in the past 3 months with some of our clients that have been in similar situations as you, we find that using short 6 to 7 second Instagram story placements with a swipe up CTA within the first 2 to 3 seconds of the ad, yada, 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 has gotten us the results that we needed to see in order for us to overcome this top of funnel issue. Okay. So you want to make suggestions. You don't want to make a definitive because you still don't have access to their account. Okay. Then you want to lead to the end of the call by saying, look, as much as I'd love to actually audit and actually offer you something on this call, unfortunately, I don't think it's doing either of us justice if we step into that stage right away. I don't think now is the exact right time to do that. Instead, what I'd like to do is let's actually break this up into 2 different calls. We'll book in a follow-up for say 3 to 5 days down the line. And then in between these 2 calls, what I'll need is actually access to the back end of your, let's say, for example, Facebook Ads Manager. And if you're at your desktop right now or any sort of computer, I'll actually walk you through the process for you to do so. Okay, so you don't want to ask for Ads Manager access too early because then they're going to think something's up, even though something's clearly not. And then you also want to kind of, if they're kind of apprehensive of giving you Ads Manager access, which I've personally never encountered, but I've heard a couple of students have, then you want to tell them that there's really nothing you can do, especially since you're walking them through how to do it. And they can turn off editing the ads, right? They can just give you view only access, and there's really nothing much you could do with that data except audit their account. Okay. And if they're at their computer, you want them to actually screen share and then walk them through step by step. Okay, this is how we ask clients to add the company or the agency business manager rather as a partner into the client business manager. And you always want to do that just for sake of simplicity, so you can grant certain permissions and rules for some of your employees in your business, right? So if you only want one media buyer to be seeing these accounts, you can turn these on for him. If you want the other media buyer to only see other accounts, you can do so, etc. Okay, so you get to grant permissions for your own organization, and they're just adding you as a partner with view only access. So once you've done that, you end off the first call assuming that you've already got all the questions answered that you need to. And by the way, I think I mentioned in the beginning that you also want them to fill out some questions, qualifying questions. You want to make sure you just smooth over any sort of questions you might have about their responses, right? So if they didn't give you a very clear answer, you want to make sure you clarify that and just pull it up and run through it in the call with them. Assuming that you've gone through this whole thing, the last thing that you have to make sure that you do, as I said, is you do not leave the first call until you get a time booked in for call 2. And you don't have to be super aggressive about it. You can just say, and by the way, while I'm still on the call, while you still have me on the call rather, let's actually pencil in a time for a follow-up call, say 3 to 5 days down the line. So that way we're all looped in and we can actually be on schedule and know what to expect in the second call, right? And you want to do this by stopping their screen share temporarily and then screen share your own laptop or computer rather, and then go into your Acuity or Calendly or whatever else, scheduling software you use, and then just show them a couple of available times. And then from there, you want to visually show them that you're booking them in for this time so that, again, it's another mental switch that they made. And then that's at that point, it's safe to leave the call. So if you have a prospect that is just not too open to disclosing certain things, or they're giving you very, very curt or blunt answers, you always want to keep in mind that they're always going to be struggling with something. Even if they think they're kind of just around to price shop, which I've had a couple of prospects like that before, they probably have some sort of issue. Because for me, just from my perspective, it's like if they're already a successful business, let's say they're way above the ballpark that I usually shoot for. So let's say they're already doing like 8 figures, and they already have a successful process. Why else would they look to get on a call with you unless they thought you could do substantially better to maybe make up or offset the switching cost of switching to another vendor? So they're already working with an agency that's doing very well for them. Why else would they hop on this call unless they saw some sort of hint of potential, no matter how small, in working with you or in switching rather, right? And the the switching cost is offset by the additional benefit of working with you. That's really the only reason they would hop on, even if you think they're price shopping. So you always want to get to the root of their issues in call one. And then now that you have access to their ads manager, or let's say Google Analytics or Shopify backend, the next step is to go ahead and audit their account. And then, whether one of your employees are doing it or whether you're shooting a video, I'd suggest that you shoot a quick 3 to 4 minute Loom video, just like this YouTube video right now is done through Loom. Not plugging anything here, but make sure you do sign up to Loom because it is a genuinely good tool for you to use as an agency owner. Anyways, use Loom, shoot a quick video, and then send it over as an email to your prospective client, and then hop on the second call. And this part, the process, is just 5 to 10 minutes of what you observed in their business manager. So kind of expanding on that auditing video, and then bringing about like a holistic review of what they should be doing. And typically for me, I don't just talk about Facebook. I also talk about, okay, what else can you be doing? Can you be shooting better content? Can you do it more consistently? Can we work on better copy, for example? Can we work on driving traffic from different sources, right? Can we improve CRO on the website and just customer experience in general, load speed? There's a lot of stuff. So I give them a holistic review of what exactly we come in and do for them and what they can improve on their own as well. And then this next part is to just section off the process into timeframes. So this is where you start introducing your offering and what you typically do for clients. And this next step should be very, very natural, as should be the rest of this framework. So after you mention all their issues, right? So everything else that they're dealing with and potential solutions, you can say something like, okay, this is what we think we can come in and do for you. And this is the logistical side of what it would look like working with us. Okay. So as I said, walk through month 1, month 2, month 3. And this might look a little different especially if you're, working with online businesses. With offline, you might offer the same exact service for every real estate agent, for example. But with ecom, every ecom business is different, right? And some clients, maybe they might benefit from month 1, not even running any sort of cold and only working on building their bottom of funnel or middle of funnel. Some other clients, maybe they need to get top of funnel to convert because they're already doing very well at bottom and middle of funnel. And some other clients, maybe they're just brand new, right? And they need help setting the whole thing up. So it's going to look a little different, especially if you're working with ecom businesses. And you want to make sure you come in prepared so you can accurately describe, okay, what's the focus of month 1, month 2, and month 3. And then that's where, as I said, you introduce your flagship offering or program. And then here, you want to also describe your process from the ground up. So everything from the initial onboarding, everything you need from the onboarding, to the research phase, to the setup, to testing, to optimization, to scale. And you want to describe, as I said, the focus of each month. Another thing that I tried to kind of squeeze into the sales process is that I also give expectations. So for example, you can say something like, to date, every single one of our clients has been able to see a minimum whatever ROAS over a 90-day slope. You can say that on average, we increase client revenues by whatever percentage, or we managed to increase ROAS by whatever percentage, etc. So give them some sort of expectation to hang on to, but keep in mind, again, you're not guaranteeing anything. Another example is like our ads will be live within 7 days. All we need to get started is you to fill out the onboarding process, right? Or all we need to get started is full access to your ad account for you to watch some of the expectations videos, pay the invoice, sign the contract, and then fill out the questionnaire that we have for you, right? So whatever your onboarding process is, you want to make it so that you can describe it very, very quickly and in simple language. And then at the end, you can say, up until this point, do you have any questions about the logistical process of working with us? Now, this part here, 2A, is really optional, and you can either do it or your contractor or one of your team members can do it. But this part is really just about sharing some results. And how it would lead into 2A, if you're doing this, is let's assume for the time being that I'm passing it off to one of my team members. I would say something like, okay, great. If you don't have any other questions about the process, I'll actually pass the ball off to, contractor name or employee name. And then he'll actually take you through some of the accounts that we've been working on the past 6 months. And some of these accounts are handpicked because they're more similar to what you're doing. Some of these accounts are just ecom businesses in general. And we want to show you that we have a very wide breadth of experience when it comes to managing ecom accounts. Okay. And when I did have one of my team members do this, it was very, very natural. So I would message him on Slack a couple hours before the actual call, and I would say, hey, make sure you get some of the case studies most relevant to this client ready. He'd do so. And then during the call, he'd know exactly which accounts to show. So there was no like fumbling back and forth, trying to find the right account, etc. He already had everything prepared. And if you have access to any sort of client results, you can do the same thing. Okay. So just be transparent, screen share, and then really just walk the potential client through, okay, what did this client start off with before working with us? And then where do we bring this client after? And then what were the 2 or 3 main changes that we made to their account in order to get to this stage? Okay. And then this part is price discussion. And I think this is where most people kind of falter, is a price. So I always lead into what's known as price bracketing. Okay. So you can say our monthly retainers range from anywhere between $4,000 to $6,000, and is primarily determined by ad spend. Based on where you're at right now, I'd be comfortable quoting you $2,500 per month plus, and then maybe you're, okay, I take that back. You should actually, okay, if you're doing solely retainers, let's say you're sticking to that $4,000 to $6,000 range, and apologize for breaking character here. Let's say you're sticking to that $4,000 to $6,000, then you want to stick to a retainer only and just be like, I'd be comfortable quoting you $5,000 per month plus ad spend. Now, if you're doing both flat retainers, or you have the option to do a percentage, you can go like our monthly flat retainers, so retainer only agreements, range from $4,000 to $6,000 and is primarily determined by ad spend. But we also have an alternate method of agency compensation, which ranges from, on the low end, $2,000 to $3,000 flat fee plus a percentage of return on ad spend, let's say. Okay. Now, you tell them that it's based primarily on ad spend, but obviously as an agency owner, you need to look at a couple other factors. So you look out for example, whether they've already spent significantly on whatever platform that you're deciding to offer to them, how much warm traffic they're starting with, and how much they consistently get from other sources, size of the store, number of products, how big of a company they are, and how much they can reasonably afford, right? So you don't want to quote, a company that's only doing $25K a month, like a $10K retainer. That's just pretty ridiculous considering the size difference. And then the last thing is your estimated returns, obviously also partially based on ad spend. The other thing that I didn't put here is that you also have to take your own margins into consideration. So that's something that I discuss a lot more in depth in my coaching program. But for now, just know that you need to keep your margins healthy as well. So charge enough, but don't charge anything crazy. That's what I'm trying to say here. Use a price bracketing because that gives a range of expectation, and then peg them at somewhere in that range so that you have room for negotiation. Okay. So I'm not a big fan of like $4,000 or $6,000 flat fee, take it or leave it, because I know that for some, like, different clients have different personas almost. There are different archetypes. So one client may have never experienced a bad agency. Another client maybe has, and one saying is like, money today is always better than money tomorrow or in 2 weeks, right? So it's different from pushing someone into a close where they don't want it. There's a difference between being pushy and also being logical and being firm when you know someone's right on the edge of closing, but just one thing is holding them back. So if you think the prospect is at that stage and they throw an objection at you where they, for example, they don't want to do a flat fee thing, they only want to do a smaller flat fee plus a percentage, then obviously you take it, right? And you negotiate as much as you can, but you don't want to just be stuck in, okay, we're just offering a flat retainer and you have to take it or leave it, right? But that's only in the cases where the client is just one step away from the close and you'd rather just finish this today on this call. Okay. Now, after you mention price, you want to shut up, because the first person who speaks usually is the one that loses a lot of leverage in the conversation. Wait for them to respond. I'd say that if you're a good closer, if you're a good salesperson, I'd say that 30-40% are probably going to be like, great, let's get started right away. What can I do next? I'd say another another 40% or so are going to be, they might have a couple of reservations, but they aren't major objections. And then another, say like 20%. And by the way, if my mental math is super off here, forgive me for that. But another small percentage might just be outright like, okay, I take a huge issue to this pricing structure. Let's definitely negotiate, right? Or maybe they'll give you a random objection like, okay, we need time to think about it, or I just don't think it's the right time, or it's too much, it's out of our budget, etc. Okay. So in the objection handling part, there are a couple of main objections, and you're going to get a better understanding of this, as I said, if you're in my coaching program, because I actually do some live sales role play every week with a lot of my students. But just to give you guys a general idea of how you should approach objections, you should always get down to the root issue, and you should do more listening than talking. Okay. And then the last thing is that you should always want the best for the client. So my philosophy is that I believe in reciprocity, right? I don't believe in being overly pushy. I don't believe in just taking. I want to come in with a giving mentality. And the thing I think that sets me apart from a lot of agency owners is that I don't come in expecting that I need to close this client. Never have that frame of mind, because when you do that, people can tell in your communication that you're just off, right? That you're just too desperate. So number one, your expectations have to be, okay, if this client is closable, then I'll close them. If they're not closable, if they have too many mental barriers, they're too much of a hassle to work with anyway. And I should probably either refer them to someone else or just cut ties entirely. Up to you, right? Now, again, you want to have the right frame of mind. And if they're giving you a weird objection, so if they're telling you, we've been burned by a lot of agencies in the past, and it's just a little bit out of our budget right now. Again, your first step is to not talk yet. You want to clarify. You don't want to just give a very haphazard answer, right? You want to clarify, and you want to ask something like, okay, I hear you that this pricing, that you think this is out of your budgeting. But let me ask you a question first, just to clarify and make sure that we're on the same page. Is this a cash flow issue, or is this like a quarterly budgeting issue? Is this that you have a lot of competing offers? Maybe you're talking to a lot of agencies, and our pricing seems significantly higher from theirs. So clarify first, get an answer from them, and then get to the root of the issue. So if they're saying that this is more so a budgeting issue, and they can only spend so much for a flat fee before that starts cutting into their profit margins, again, that's why there's room for negotiation. That's why you can negotiate down to a flat retainer plus percentage of return ad spend, for example. Or if they say that you have a lot of competition, you can always get a better understanding of who you're up against. And then also ask them, just out of curiosity, and this is a line that I always love to use, just out of curiosity, if there's one thing that would make whoever it is that you decide to end up working with, make them basically a dream agency to work with, a dream service vendor, what would that one thing be? And then you want to take things from there. And usually they do have this one thing, just one thing that's kind of setting them apart from actually closing on the call. Okay, so again, at a high level, clarify, use empathetic or sympathetic language, right? Show that you actually really feel deeply for what they're going through, and then take your logical position and try to get to the root of the issue. And a lot of times their objections don't actually make logical sense. So that's why you want to keep a cool head and make sure that you're asking the right questions at the right time and you're responding in the correct way. Now, assuming that everything up until this stage, and this is quite a long video, so hopefully you're sticking with me, but assuming that everything up until this stage goes well, you don't want to leave the call until the money is in whatever payment processor that you're using. And this is a big thing for me. So if you use Stripe, if you use PayPal, the money has to not clear, because it might take a while to clear, but you at least have to see the payment notification in order for you to hop off the call. Because at this point, they've already made a verbal agreement, and there should realistically be nothing holding them back from actually paying you on the spot, especially if you set the right expectations. Now, the edge case here is that if you're only talking to a CMO and there's still some sort of additional higher up that you have to kind of approve this by. But even in that scenario, you never want the CMO to do the selling for you, because there's really no incentive in it for them. So if anything, if you have to book in another follow-up call, you want to make sure that you're on it and everyone, and you verify, as many times as you need to, that everyone else who needs to make the decision is on the next call. So there's no sort of hiccups, there's no sort of weird, excuse that they can use to edge away from making the right decision for their business. Okay. Now you take the payment, you send over whatever invoice you need to, you ask for all their business information, business address, full name, whatever. Okay. You send over the invoice to them. You make sure, and if they're hesitant, they're like, okay, I can get this paid in 2 days. Then you can ask, or you can tell them rather, while I'm on this call, I'd actually like for us to complete the invoicing process, while you still have me here, so that by the end of this call, we can get started straight away. I'll send over the onboarding process and the service agreement, and then we can get started as soon as today. Right? So emphasize that speed is of the essence, and that while you have them on the call, it's just more convenient, because if there's any sort of, again, bank issues, hiccups, etc., you can help them work through it. And if they have any remaining objections or mental blocks, they don't have to wrestle with it on their own. And that's something you want to tell them as well. Okay, so have them pay on the call, and then once you get the payment in your payment processor, that's where you want to leave the call. And keep in mind that I do this for clients. I do this for one-off consulting students who come to me for email advice or outreach advice, or even any sort of B2B sales advice. I do this for month-long coaching students that actually come in for a 4-week intensive program with me. I always take payment on the call, especially once we've come to a mutual agreement on both sides. There's no reason that they can't, unless it's like an act of God or something, there's no reason that they can't pay on the spot after they've made the verbal agreement. Okay, so that concludes the video. Hopefully you got a lot out of it, because my voice is kind of dead right now. But hopefully this was valuable to you guys. If you guys enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up down below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and then I'll see you guys back here for the next video.